Okay, we're going to get more repetition. But before we go to more repetition, here's something extremely novel. The fourth reading in Parshas Pekudei, which is chapter 39, verse 33, tells us that after the completion of the work on the Mishkan, which is how the third reading ends, all of the work that was required was completed. And at the end of chapter 30, verse 32, it says, "Vayasu b'nei Yisrael kechol asher tziva Hashem es Moshe kenasu." The Jewish people did exactly as Moshe Rabbainu had instructed. The fourth reading begins with the words, "Vayaviu es hamishkan el Moshe." They brought the Mishkan to Moshe Rabbainu. Es ha'ohel, v'es kol kelov, the enclosure, all of the artifacts, karasov, karashav, the various hooks or clasps, the boards, brichav, va'amudav, the supports, and the pillars, va'adanav, and all of the foundational sockets. So everything was brought to Moshe Rabbeinu. And here we get some more repetition. In verse 34, we have the ram skins dyed red, and we have the tachash skin, and we have the parichas hamasach. And here we're going to go through a whole litany of different things that we learned about already. The aron, the ark that Moses made, and the cover, the table, and the artifacts that were necessary for the fashioning and the maintaining of the showbread, the menorah, and all of its different accoutrements, the small golden altar, and the anointing oil, as well as the incense. The outer altar, a whole repetition, kalei achatzer, and then we talk about the cloth that was made to cover them. And verse 42 kind of concludes this whole litany of things. The end of the fourth reading, Kichala shatziva Hashem es Moshe, just as Moshe Rabbeinu had been commanded, Kain also, that's exactly what the Jewish people did. And verse 42 seems very much like verse 32, only it's after they brought it to Moses. Verse 32 is before they brought it, and verse 42 is after they brought it to Moses. And the fourth reading concludes with Moshe Rabbeinu concluding his inspection, finishing looking at everything. And Moshe saw all of the work that was done, and he saw it was exactly as he had been instructed, and Moses finishes by blessing the Jewish people. That's the fourth reading in a nutshell. So we're going to focus primarily on the opening reading of Revi, where it says, "Vayaviu es hamishkan al Moshe." They brought the Mishkan to Moshe. So why did they bring the Mishkan to Moshe? Why did they bring it to Moshe? Well, why does the Torah have to tell us that even? So there are different explanations. According to some opinions, like for example, what's brought down in the Zohar, they brought the Mishkan to Moshe Rabbeinu so that he could tell them, is this what you meant? Remember, only he got to see the picture. Nobody else got to see the vision. He had the vision and said, is this the vision? You described it to us, but is this what you saw? Well, as Barbanel points out, kind of developing this idea, he says everybody worked in isolation. There was not a large factory, if you will, or big studio where everybody was working. But people got instructions, they took home the materials, and they worked. And then everybody brought it to a common place. And then they said to Moshe, so this is what it looked like? Was this the intention that the Jew understood from Hashem? Shuleb Diskin says something very interesting. He says that if Moshe Rabbeinu had gone around to the various sites where they were working and inspected different artifacts, there immediately would have been politics. Where did he go first? Where did he go second? Who got the most prominent Moshe visit? Who was the last one he saw? It's kind of like a very mundane kind of answer, but we have similar things later when it says about Moshe Rabbeinu blowing the trumpets. But there's Rishonim who say that the reason there was the trumpets is you have 12 different leaders to gather. The 12 leaders shouldn't be able to say, I got called first, or second, or third. Why did Moses call me last? So there are similar things, even in Rishonim, about Moshe and the Jewish people. But at any rate, it doesn't really answer the question as to, so why did they have to bring it? The Torah has to emphasize that it was brought to Moshe. What if we wouldn't know this? Like, what if the Torah... I mean, it would have to have been brought together in a central location at some point anyway, because you got to put it together. So why does the Torah emphasize Vayaviu es hamishkan al Moshe? They brought the Mishkan to Moshe. You could have just said that they gathered everything together. And then we could have heard at the end of the fourth reading, Moshe Rabbeinu came to the central place where everything was gathered. He looked it over and he said, "Yo, this is what I was told. This was the vision I saw." Like, that would be sufficient. Instead, we start by emphasizing the idea that this was brought to Moshe, even before we go into the details. So Rashi waives the other approaches, and he has a unique approach to resolving this question. He follows the teachings of our sages, and he says, this is the Pshuta Shal Mikra, Vayaviu es ha-Mishkan, they brought the Mishkan, V'goymer, etc. Why did they bring the Mishkan? Not they gathered it, not they prepared it, they brought it to Moshe. There was an emphasis on it reaching the hands of Moshe. So Rashi says, they couldn't put it up. As explained in the writings of our sages, the Rishonim, that it says, with regard to putting up the Mishkan, in a number of places, the Torah uses a singular expression. You shall put it up. So they understood from this, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, a person will put it up. So different people tried, and nobody could do it. So they couldn't put it up. And because they couldn't, so that's why they brought it to Moshe. And here Rashi interjects and he says, because Moshe Rabbeinu never did any work in the Mishkan, he gave lots of instructions, he inspired the people, he led the campaign, but he never actually raised the hammer. Now, it's interesting Rashi says this, because Rashi himself tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu kind of fashioned a menorah. But I guess Moshe didn't really do anything then. He just threw the ingot of gold into a fire and just was blindly banging, and boom, and a menorah came out. So you can't really say he did that. He didn't actually put his hand to anything. So Moshe didn't actually do anything. And there's this emphasis or satisfaction that people have when they do something. You work hard, you accomplish something, you feel good about your accomplishments. So nobody could put it together. And because Moshe Rabbeinu did not do any work, so that's why he niach le'akadosh baruch hu hakamasai. That's how God turned Moses into the Mishkan maker, by leaving its erection to him. You, Moshe, will be the one to put this up. Nobody will be able to put it up. And that's what happened. Nobody could put it up. Why? Very strong people. But kaved hakrashim, the weight of the boards was unbelievable. Ein koyach ba'adam l'zakfan. No person could get those boards upright. U'Moshe ha'midai. And Moshe did. Now, is this to say that Moshe was a weightlifter? How did he manage to get the boards upright when nobody else could? So Rashi says, here's what happened. Omar Moshe lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu said before God, we all know you used a singular expression. That was part of the commandment. You gave me a vision. You told me what should be built, and then you said, a person, one person will put the Mishkan up. Moshe said, I don't understand. This is not working. How is it possible for your Torah to be fulfilled, your instructions? How can one person put this up? I can't even get the boards upright. So when Moshe Rabbeinu came before God and he expressed this question, this amazement, Omar Loi, at that point God said to him, Asik ata biyadcha. You put your hand to those boards. You go and put your hand. So Moshe did. And what happened was, Nira kimakimai, it seemed as if Moshe Rabbeinu was setting the boards upright, but in fact, the boards kind of set themselves up. So Moshe Rabbeinu went over, he was going through the motions of putting the boards up, but the moment he put his hand to the board immediately began to lift itself. And actually the boards put themselves upright.
Was it obvious that it was divine help to others?
Did others notice that Moshe Rabbeinu was doing magic? I don't know. I can't answer that question. I wasn't there. But this is what I could tell you. This is what happened, because this is what our sages tell us. So I know that's what happened. It doesn't say other people could see this or not. It does say it was nira. It says, Rashi says, it seemed that he was putting it up. So maybe everybody didn't notice it. Maybe everybody thought that was natural. When Moshe Rabbeinu put his hand to it and started to lift, and it lifted up. It did seem like he put it up. So possibly nobody understood what was going on except for Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And this is the meaning of what we say later in verse 40. And you can take a look at this all by yourself. Go to verse 40, chapter 40, pardon me. verse 17, the beginning of the 6th reading. It says, Vahi b'chedesh harishayin, it was on the first month, Bashana Hashenis of the 2nd year, Be'echad l'chedesh, on the first of the month, which is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. What happened? Hukam HaMishkan. What does hukam mean? It doesn't say Heikim, it doesn't say they put up the Mishkan, it says hukam. What does it mean? It put itself up. The Mishkan established itself. So this is the meaning of what says hukam HaMishkan, hukamei elov. All of this, Rashi draws from Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma, from the Medrash of Rabbi Tanchuma. Now, this is something that requires significant elucidation. What exactly happened here? They tried to put it together. The Medrash is telling us they couldn't put it together. And because they couldn't put it together, the Tanchuma says they brought it to Moshe. Moshe also couldn't put it together, so he spoke to God. So God said, go and try again. And Moshe did. And now, Nira Kemakimai. Now it looked like he was putting it up. What were they thinking? What was Moshe thinking? What happened? We don't get a complete story here. It's not so hard to understand why Rashi rejects the approach of the Rabbi Mendel, even though it's based on the Zohar. Because in Pshuta Shal Mikra, on the literal level, it doesn't have to say Vayaviu es Mishkan al Moshe. It could say Vayasfu. If it was made in individual places, they gathered the Mishkan together. It could say Moshe came and looked at it. But the fact that they brought it to Moshe seems to indicate it wasn't just bringing together of pieces. It wasn't just inspection. As if, okay, now it's yours. There was like some reason that it had to be brought to Moshe specifically. So what's going on here? So, lucky for us that Rebbe explained this. For this you got to turn to Burim book, page Shin Tzadik Tes. This is the 8th entry in Parshas Pekudei. So question 1, the obvious question, which I kind of already addressed a little bit. Why didn't the Jewish people just put it together? Together. Why didn't they use keches mishutafim? Why didn't they use joint effort? How heavy could those boards have been? Very heavy. A person can't lift it, 2 people lift it. 2 people can't, 5 people lift it, 10 people lift it. It can't be impossible. Enough people, they built the pyramids. they could lift the boards. It certainly, if they had joint effort, they certainly could have picked the boards up. Wood is wood. It's impossible to suggest that many people could not lift it. And number 2, though we said, but no, it had to be done by one, because the pasuk indicates v'hakimaisa, not v'hakimaisem. You put it up, singular. So if it had to be put up singular, so why did they bring it to Moshe? Why would they think that Moshe succeeded when they failed? Moshe Rabbeinu is 81 years old now. Betzalel is 13. Probably was a very mature 13-year-old. So probably he was not only very intelligent, but already well-muscled. And Aliyah was of similar age. There was lots of younger people. So that makes sense to you. He said, oh, it says one person. All the young people tried. We couldn't. Let's bring it to the 81-year-old man. He'll surely be able to do it. Why would Moshe be able to do what they couldn't do? And they should have asked Moshe Rabbeinu, tell us what to do. Not bring it to Moshe. Bring it to Moshe as if indicates, for some reason to them it was perfectly clear that Moshe Rabbeinu could do this when they couldn't. What were they thinking? Number 3, it says hukam, that the Mishkan actually put itself up, so to speak. But that pasuk is speaking about specifically Yom HaShmini. That pasuk is speaking about the 8th day. That's why we went to that pasuk. We read that pasuk together. Rosh Chodesh Nisan. But did you forget that Rashi himself interprets already earlier and explains that for 7 days the Mishkan was put up and then taken down, and then put up and then taken down? So if Hukam HaMishkan is indicative of how the Mishkan was put up through Moshe's seeming efforts, yet the Mishkan kind of putting itself up, why would we emphasize what happened on the 8th day? Why not emphasize what happened on the 1st day, 2nd day, 3rd day, 4th day, 5th day, 6th day, 7th day, 7 days in a row, putting it up, taking it down? How'd that happen? Why was it only hukam on that day? So these are all really good questions. In Kedei Lahaven Zeis, on page Tuf now, in order to understand this, Aleinu Lahagdim Ulevayiras Hasiba, we first have to preface and explain the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu put the Mishkan together during the Sivas Mea Meluyim. Mishkan, Misyachas b'mefurish liyem hashmini l'miluim. The commandment to put a Mishkan together specifically refers to the 8th day, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when the Mishkan will begin to function. That's when God says, put it together now. Because otherwise, put it together and took it apart. So if you put it together and take it apart and put it together and took it apart and put it together and took it apart, and he wasn't fulfilling any commandments of the Torah, why did he actually do that for? If the Levites had to go through and the Kohanim had to go through the motions, why couldn't you just stage it? They have these not a mock wedding, but they have a practice where they actually go through. They don't actually put up the chuppah. They walk up to the chuppah would-be. They don't actually wear the wedding gown. You make believe you're wearing the wedding gown. It's a run-through. So if they were doing run-throughs here, why do a run-through? Why do you have to put up the Mishkan?
Why do they call it the 8th day?
Because it followed 7 days of inaugural services in which they were not really inaugural, they were getting ready, they were practicing. That is the day of inaugural service, when the actual service was inaugural, was from the 8th day and onward. That was from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. From the 23rd day of Adar, the Mishkan was put together, taken apart, put together, and taken apart, and they went through the motions
7 days.
For 7 days. Ha'hezber lekachu. The explanation of all this, as the Rebbe explains elsewhere, is as follows. It's true. Moshe Rabbeinu was never specifically commanded to put the Mishkan together for 7 days and take it apart. He had to do that. He had other commandments about these 7 days. He had commandments to educate Aaron. He had commandments to bring Aaron into tandem of the service. And in order to bring Aaron into the service, you had to have a Mishkan. It says, for example, that Aaron and his sons should gather at the door to the Ohel Moed. Well, if you don't have an Ohel Moed, how do you have a door? It doesn't say where the door would be. It doesn't say a make-believe door. It says the door of the Ohel Moed. So we understand, if it says a door of Ohel Moed, what must it be?
Mishkan.
An Ohel Moed, because you can't have a door without having an Ohel Moed. So, in other words, was Moshe Rabbeinu, did he receive a commandment to put together the Mishkan? No, but he received the commandment to do things with a Mishkan in place, from which he understood. Obviously, the Mishkan would have to be put together. When it was being put together during those 7 days, think carefully before you answer this question. When it was being put together, were they fulfilling a mitzvah of putting it together? No. What were they fulfilling a mitzvah of?
Training.
They were doing the training necessary so that they could fulfill other mitzvahs. It's called, at best, hechsher mitzvah, a preparation for a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah in and of itself. It's like building the sukkah. If you build the sukkah, a beautiful sukkah, with tremendous toil and effort, but you never actually spend time in the sukkah, did you fulfill the mitzvah? Of course not.
Yeah.
The mitzvah isn't sukkahs tasu, it says sukkahs teishvu. The thing is to spend time in the sukkah. Obviously, if you didn't make a sukkah, you're not going to have a sukkah to spend time in. You had to build the sukkah, but there is no mitzvah in building the sukkah per se. So the halachic things that guide how we do this mitzvah, they guide how we spend time in the sukkah. They don't guide us in how you make the sukkah. Make the sukkah however you want. Can I stand in my head to make the sukkah? Spit wooden nickels, I don't care. It's not relevant to us. Once you're in the sukkah, then there are laws that govern how you should spend time there. Time should be spent respectfully, time should be spent in a way of kviyas and of permanence, and so on and so forth. You're supposed to eat there. So when it comes to putting the Mishkan up in the 7 days, it wasn't about putting the Mishkan up. It was about doing certain things. It's self-understood. In order to do those things, you have to put the Mishkan up. Do you understand the difference? So this will help us now understand what's going on here on the 8th day. B'shivas Yemei HaMiluyim, during the 7 days in which they prepared, the Yakukam HaMishkan, the putting together of the Mishkan, was only an emtsa'i, not a matara. An emtsa'i means a means. It was not an end in and of itself. There was no mitzvah to do this. There was a mitzvah to do other things, and you had to do this in order to get there. Certainly, the Mishkan then can be put together with joint effort, because how you put it together wasn't important. The main thing is it should be in place so we can do other things. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, bring various offerings that would, so to speak, inaugurate or bring Aaron into this new role of his. And it can be done through many people. There's no difficulty in doing that. The Mishkan put together many people. After he went through the 7-day exercise, for a week we went through the motions. Now it's the 8th day, a new week, it's Sunday. It's time for us to actually fulfill the Mishkan. Now there's a mitzvah to put the Mishkan together. Now it can no longer be put together by a joint effort, because the Torah specifically says that the mitzvah of putting together the Mishkan is singular. One person will put it together. How one person put this together? It has to be through one person. The Torah uses Lashon Yochid. The Torah uses a singular expression in Parshas Truma. In chapter 26, in verse 30, it says clearly, V'hakei Moisa. You should put it together. The Mishkan. Ki mishpatai, in according to its rule, to its ordinance. Asher hareisa b'har. All right. So they know they had this mitzvah. And Moshe said, that's the vision I saw. Saw a vision of one person putting this together. So they tried. And they couldn't do it. And they thought that because the mitzvah is that one person should do it, so one person has to put this together now, because now we have a mitzvah. They saw this can't be done. It's God's command, but can't be done. So what did they come along and say? God made us a demand that's impossible for us to meet? Chas v'shalom. God doesn't make impossible demands. So what was going on? So they came to the conclusion, the reason for this is, it's not just because it's heavy. If God gave us the commandment, it could be done. They said, clearly this is not our job. If God said it can be done, it can be done. If we can't do it, maybe we can do it. And they thought, maybe we're not deserving of this mitzvah. Why wouldn't they be deserving of a mitzvah? Why would they think he didn't mean us? Because, as we learned earlier, what does the Mishkan symbolize? God's forgiveness. The Shekhinah returning to the Jewish people. Why did the Shekhinah leave? Ego. So all the people there were guilty by association. The actual perpetrators were no longer around, but everybody was guilty by association. They were there. And because they were there, they thought, that's why we can't put it together, because we're tainted by sin. Who was the only one who was totally untainted? Moshe. He had the perfect alibi. He wasn't in town. Even Yoshua was kind of there. Why wasn't he there to stop them? But Moshe was on the mountain. So they figured, okay, it must be Moshe. He's the only one who has no possible connection to this Aveda. Kadesh Yakim is Mishkan Ba'atzmei. He said, Moshe, clearly Hashem wants you to do this. What happened? The Jewish people brought the Mishkan to Moshe. And then they figured out, Shelo yachal lahakimei shum adam. No person, not even Moshe. Afilu Moshe Rabbeinu ba'atzmei couldn't do this. And then they came to the conclusion it's not because of sin. We're not being prevented. Why can no person do this by himself? Because only then did they come to the conclusion that was machmas kavod akrashim. They said, no, it is too heavy. We thought maybe it was sin preventing us. No, it's too heavy. Oh, it's too heavy. Moshe, what are you supposed to do now? Here Moshe speaks to God and he says, okay, God, I also thought maybe it's because they were tainted by sin, but I try to lift it. I can't do that either. What do you expect here? God says, go back to Moshe. Go, very good. Now go back and put your hand to it. After you know that it's not about sin. It's not because Moshe didn't sin. So why did Hashem want Moshe to be the one to put his hand to it? So the only way we could say is this is because Moshe didn't have a chance to be directly involved in Mishkan making. Hashem reserved that for Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu went back, and Nireh Kemakimei, in everybody's eyes, what did it look like? He's the Mishkan maker. He's doing this. However, in fact, this is an interesting mitzvah that actually got done by itself. And the truth is that some mitzvahs, we have to do our part, and the rest is done by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For example, there's a mitzvah to have children, but there are people who try their whole life to have children and never succeed. So what does it mean? They didn't do the mitzvah? And the person who has many children, such a big mitzvah doer, because it's not always in our hands. Our hands is to do our part of the mitzvah. Moshe Rabbeinu did his part of the mitzvah. That was the V'hakei Moshe. That was the commandment. What actually happened? Hukam. It actually put itself together. But Moshe Rabbeinu had to do his part, and this way he was the Mishkan maker, and the Jewish people understood that this can only be accomplished when the Rebbe puts his hand to it, when the Moshe Rabbeinu puts his hand to it. Although, in fact, in truth, it was Hukam. In the end, the circumstances kind of put themselves together. Now we understand how and why by Yaviu they brought the Mishkan specifically to Moshe, and why only Moshe Rabbeinu was able to bring it to its successful conclusion.